Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender Ed, Blender HD on Twitter. I'm also the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio masterclass teaching you the entire game theory of DFS. Theoryofdfs.com. Joining me this week, filling in for Eric Beimfor, special guest, Eric's co-host on a premium show on Roto Grinders called Q Hunting, which I think is extremely valuable. I know you guys have been doing it even for NBA. You're behind the paywall at Roto Grinders usually. You're usually on crunch time, and rightfully so, because we got John Breslin here, SquirrelPatrol, who I like. I like your Twitter description is basically the guy that you see on top, above you on most contests on DraftKings and FanDuel. And I wanted to bring you on because on this show we talk about, just like the tagline to my course, how to think like a professional DFS player. Would you consider yourself? I know the term is kind of nebulous. Would you consider yourself a professional DFS player?
Yeah, I would. Because I quit my job almost 2 years ago to the day. so it's about as professional as you can get. But I agree. I think that term is thrown around a little bit too much. Because I don't know, I'm not going to play DFS the rest of my life, right? I'm going to do something else. so I kind of think of myself as taking some time off of work, and fortunate enough to have made enough money at DFS to take some time off of my real job. So I guess that makes me a professional DFS player.
What was your real job?
So I did software consulting. Actually, I made pretty good money. I'm doing IT, project management type stuff. I did some software, and it was hard to find specialists in this kind of software. And so I kind of specialized in this human resources software, and then did IT project management.
And so is it the type of thing very similar to me? I did digital marketing, I did web development. I could go out right now and probably get a job that pays as much as I make now. The only difference is that it's 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. I'm in my pajamas and I don't have a boss.
Yeah. It's I think it's probably same field of IT technology and kind of contracting your hours out. You're literally getting charging a client per the hour, for your work kind of thing.
Right, I'd much rather look over whether or not I could play some contrarian Nikola Vucevic lineups tonight than worry about some clients, some software or campaign or something that's going on.
Yeah, it depends. I feel differently different days. Sometimes I actually miss going into an office, but it probably wasn't that way for the first year and a half.
Do you feel that way mostly on losing days?
Yeah, we can go into it, right? The psychology of DFS playing can be brutal, right? So on losing days, losing stretches, it's my wife's been how's the job search going? I'm
well, you've had a good run, the past month. Great, but I think a lot of people, it's that's Instagramification of everything, of you see everyone's greatest moments, and then you're into yourself, so you don't get maybe the last time we haven't seen a screenshot from you is 3 months, but to me it's almost like it happens more often than not because I'm following a whole bunch of people. I don't think people understand if you're a very successful player, very profitable player, just how often you do lose.
Yeah, it's not all screenshots and rainbows, right? It's if I haven't seen a screenshot from a top player in a while, it's somebody go check on him and make sure he's okay, right? You lose all the time, and I lose for long stretches. I've had times where I've lost 3-4 months in a row, and it's terrible. And I've heard you say that if you don't question whether or not you should still be playing at least once or twice a year, you're not playing seriously enough, right? Guys that play every day, go through these long stretches and think I've lost it. And we're haunted by the first couple of guys who were really successful at DFS, or Sahil Sud and Kandia, right? And the rumor is, and fairly confirmed rumors, they both went bust, right? They both won millions and millions of dollars and then lost it. And it's like that thought that like, man, like what's the exit strategy, right? If you're a DFS player, because you don't want to be that guy that loses it and no one taps you on the shoulder and says like, yeah, everybody's passed you by, and then like it's just straight downhill, you know.
Do you think, okay, from your opinion, because we've been playing for about the same amount of time. I started in October 2015. When did you start?
I started like in late 2014, but then I kind of ramped up throughout 2015, played more and more. And so yeah, like I started playing like pretty heavily. I think like summer, fall of 2015.
Do you okay? So the question is, I mean, I think we could both agree that DFS from 2012 and DFS in like 2015, 16, like the boom period, and DFS now are like it's like different eras of like the edge against the field and the predominant strategies. How much do more people know? It's similar in poker where like 1983, like 1960 versus 1985 versus 2003 versus now. It's like, the knowledge that could beat the games in 2003 like no longer cuts it now. Do you believe that when we talk about previously successful players, not necessarily going bust, but not showing the positive returns that they did, do you think it's more due to the field getting better? Is one of three things, I think. The field getting better, two, not improving your own game, or variance. And I think because from my viewpoint, it's like guys like Kandia and Sahil, I think would be fine now. It's just that like you play like that, like everyone knows what they knew in 2014. Yeah. So it's like they'd still be competitive now, but not as dominant. But still, the variance is so high that you could be good and still go broke without good bankroll management. But there are also instances where there are guys that used to be good in 2012 that essentially are losing players now. So what do you think is the most predominant case of having a great player that somehow just like over a 3-year period is like whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I think like maybe bankroll management, like if they've gone bust, it was probably bankroll management, right? Like they probably put in too much on every slate. I guess I don't know where we are on the curve. That's a big question for me because recently, like I'm coming off of 2 great months, and recently I've been wondering: is the average player getting worse? Like
so you think it's the opposite? Do you think the average player is actually getting worse?
Yeah, because I think like FanDuel and DraftKings are doing a ton of marketing for the sports book, and I wonder if there's a bunch of people that are coming in from the sports book side now, right? Like because like sports book, and maybe it's just my little bubble, right? Because I live in Virginia, and we just got like FanDuel and DraftKings just went live. William Hill, sports books all just went live within the past couple of weeks, and I wonder if the sites are doing a ton of marketing, right? Like the DraftKings logo was behind the uprights in the Super Bowl. Like, are people going to play sports bets and then going kind of wandering, kind of like they would wander into the poker room or something, right? Like wander into the fantasy sports lobby and going like, what is this? Like, oh, for $5, I'll give this a shot, right? So again, I actually wonder if part of the reason I've been doing so well in the last couple of months is maybe with seeing a ton more beginner players, but I don't know.
But it's not. But the sign of a very good player is that you're attributing your success due to the weakness of other people's play rather than the brilliance of your own.
Yeah. Well, because yeah.
Well, but to me, that's the sign of a good player. Like you go, well, long run, I have an edge, and it happened this late, and like it's not like, oh well, I called this, and I call like typically like. I find that good players are more likely to say, yeah, I got lucky to win $100,000 than to like beat their chest over it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah. So,
but you think I have a similar opinion to you, but a little bit more nuanced. So when you talk about like people say like DFS is dying, but if you take a look at the user growth on both platforms, it's been up year over year every year. I think it comes down to the old school mentality, which we see a lot, that 80-20, like, okay, you play 80% cash games and then you play 20%, like the double ups, like that, the head to head lobby, what we consider to be cash games, it's using a poker terminology for that, is that the people that are wandering in to daily fantasy from the sports book, like, they're the ones that are making 8-leg parlays. Like, they're not playing a $10 double up. They're playing the $15 fadeaway, or the eight, whatever the main GPPs are, and that is the onesies and twosies are coming into that. Yet in the cash games, like, it's much more cutthroat, because people that are more likely to play double ups and head to heads and play 100 contests here are more likely to be at least serious players, seriously enough that they're probably not making as big mistakes. So when people say that DFS is dying, they may be attributing the the liquidity in DFS is going heavily towards GPPs, and then they're noticing that, oh, I can't cash in double ups anymore. Where are all the bad players that there used to be there? It's like, well, they're all sitting in the eight. They're all making $8 lineups into the large field GPP, where you're building 150 and trying to take advantage of that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I do. I think the casual player is playing more tournaments, and I think like it's been going that way for years. Where like people, like the guy you want to play against is the guy who's at a bar entering one $8 lineup, trying to win $100,000. Right. No matter what the payout structure is, right? Like they want to win the $100,000, and they kind of expect to lose. That's the player that I want to play against. And like I think that's the casual player, and like that's like you've. Like the average player in cash games has been getting sharper and sharper for years, and I think the average player, I speculate that the average player in tournaments right now, maybe over the last few months, is getting worse. But it's just speculation.
Okay, well, I'll posit a cause for this. Do you think? Okay, because we had these revolutions in DFS, 2012. It was Wild West. It was if you knew the guy wasn't even injured, like that was an edge. Like just the information was not out there. Then in 2016 we started getting more tools, right? Tools and content, and it was much more prevalent to know like what the good plays were, right? What the good that they were decent, they were preliminary rudimentary projection models and tools and optimizers. Now we're getting to the point in 2021 where like I can't build a better model than what I could pay for, than what I could get from like roto grinders. Like I know that, or I'm not going to beat it that way. I've always said in GPPs, and it's the main reason why I used to play primarily large field GPPs, is that the bigger edge now is not the shit lineups, not the Joe Schmo didn't realize that Chris Paul was out and he has him in his lineup type of lineups. To me, it's the people that are trying to utilize tools without understanding DFS strategy and are essentially like when projection slaves. Like I'm big into projections, but as far as like viewing a median as a prediction, I'm going to build 100 lineups that all have high projection and no leverage, and like, yeah, you're building 100 lineups and you cash 40 of them, like they're slowly bleeding their money away using tools, using the information that's out there, but truthfully they're building worse lineups because they're just all I have to do is press a button, set uniques to 2, put a little randomness, and where's my money? And you download the CSVs and you see like 20% of the contests are like these cash lineups, essentially like cash lineups, triple up lineups, and in the large field GPPs, like it's absurdly hard to win slates that way unless like you nail everything perfectly, and the high score is 430. Like is that what you view as like the average player has gotten worse, even though the average player has more information and tools at their disposal?
So I think that's the factor. I do think there are people, but that's even like a step beyond the casual player. Like I think there's guys, yeah, that are kind of beyond just sitting on the app and they enter one lineup a week or whatever. I think there's guys that are into it and they've got some tools, but like, yeah, they don't know how to use those tools, right? So they're using projections, but they're just entering 150, like the 150 most optimal lineups, right? Like from roto grinders or something, and that's not going to win you money in a tournament. So I think that's a factor too. But I think we're seeing more of an influx of like totally brand new users. I think, but I don't know. I don't have like I should probably know this.
Right, you should probably look and do
of the companies. But I think like particularly like I played a lot of like double ups for the Super Bowl, right? Because I was thinking like people people were going to be playing DraftKings for the first time. And I thought there was like an absurd number of like guys without the stripes, right, on DraftKings playing like the double ups for the Super Bowl. So I think that we're getting an influx of new users, but I don't know.
But enough so that the onesies and I call them the onesies and twosies, because these aren't people that are playing 50 lineups or 100 lineups. These are people who are playing one lineup, two lineup. You believe that there's more of them now in comparison, because some people would say the opposite, right? Because some people, I mean, it may be a misconception that, oh, like the large field contests are flooded with 150 maxers, and I think a lot of people miss the correlation versus causation argument. Like you're someone that would get targeted, John, right? You play 150 lineups. How am I supposed to compete against you? I'm playing one lineup. You're playing 150. Like you have an unfair advantage against me. And I always say then play 150 bad lineups. Like all it does is make you go broke quicker. So to me, if you see someone that has been entering 150 lineups across multiple sites for months upon years, like that's survivorship bias. Like it's not because they're entering 150 lineups that they're good. They're good so they enter 150, because if you keep on entering 150 and you're bad, we're not going to see you entering 150 anymore. You're not going to be in the lobby anymore. You're going to be broke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man, it used to be 500 too. Like I won my first tournament win was $50,000 win. I remember in baseball, it was like I uploaded it to DraftKings and it cut off. I was uploading 500 lineups, and I only got to like 237, and the lineup that won the 50,000 was like lineup 233 out of 237, and so like if I just a split second off, like I wouldn't have won that $50,000, but yeah, so like I even think in like 150 lineup sets, right? Like so when I look at a slate, I'll think about like how many games there are and like how many game stacks do I want to do, and like I'll think of that in terms of 150 lineups, and like there'll be like maybe the superstar players in a bad matchup. I don't want a lot of them, so yeah, I want 8 lineups, right? Because I want about 8 out of 150, with that guy, with that player in the lineup. Because I play mostly 150 max entries, so yeah, I even think in terms of 150 lineups.
Right. So it's like a portfolio.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
you view your 150 set as if you're playing like, here's a portfolio of lineups. They all contain either one strategy, two strategies, different combinations of strategies, and if that strategy is the successful route to first, you have 150 outs to get there.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I kind of try to think of it in terms of what could happen on this slate, and then like how do I represent all of those possibilities in 150 lineups, right?
And then
like,
and sometimes it means that you're condensed on a couple of players in certain positions, and sometimes you're not, and sometimes you're much more diverse. So to me, I view that not necessarily as a strategy, but more as a product. The diversification is the product of the strategies. So because people, I think, misappropriate. I think would you agree with this? I think good players talk when max MME type players talk in terms of exposures only because it's easier to represent your strategy of specific lineups by exposures. but the exposure is just a byproduct of the strategy. So when I say, oh, I'm like yesterday with DeMarcus Cousins, if I told you I was I've in 150 lineups, I'm under the field on DeMarcus Cousins. Does that mean I don't like DeMarcus Cousins? It just means that, like, you know that my strategy is going to be to play like a Kaminsky, either go down at center or go up and play Jokic at center and build those types of lineups, because obviously I need a center and I'm not playing the chalk center. And it's also more likely that maybe I do have Beal in more of my lineups because I'm already getting leverage by fading Cousins. But you would get all of that information by me just saying I'm under on Cousins, but it doesn't mean I can't make Cousins lineups. It just means that, okay, here, if you told me that yesterday you were, heavy on Luka, right? I'd be like, okay, that means he's probably playing less Beal. He's probably, because just by the construction type means that if you're going to play Luka and Cousins, like, you're probably not playing Beal because then your lineups will be too chalky. You're probably maybe you didn't swap to Booker. Maybe you're playing Michael Bridges in the small forward spot instead. Maybe you're playing Baisley over SGA. Like, I could visualize what your lineups kind of look like, but to the average player, it just, if I said I was underweight on Cousins, they would view it as, oh, I don't think Cousins is going to do well. Like, I think he's over-owned. But really what I'm saying is that I'm employing a strategy in more of my lineups without Cousins than with Cousins. And if I say I X him out, that means I'm choosing to diversify, to have no diversification. Just like, nope, I'm hoping that Cousins busts, and that's it. But it doesn't represent how I feel how he's going to do.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction, right? Like, I think people are always asking for picks, right? And like, who do you think is going to do well? And it's like the base question that somebody asks of a content guy or whatever. Like, what do you think about this player? And like, there might be, like, I might like him in some lineups, but not others, right? And even if I decide I'm totally going away from him, doesn't necessarily mean like I'm totally committed to the idea that I think he's going to fail. Just might mean that I think he's going to be over-owned, right? So I'm going to try to go for a strategy tonight where I'm going to go way under the field, and therefore, like, because I think he's going to be hugely owned. So if he busts, then suddenly I'm skyrocketing all of my lineups like to the top of the field.
Right, and then, but the choice could be that you could say I'm lock buttoning Cousins and building strategies that are around him, as chalk being well, but now you're finding leverage somewhere else. So I think many average players, I distill it down to like stupid facetious comments, as you know, right? Lineups not players. Like, what does that mean? It's like, that's what that means. Or play whoever you want. Like, what does that like? It's like, dude, play Cousins, don't play Cousins. Play Beal, don't play Beal. Like, just build a lineup that has low enough ownership and high enough projection that could win whatever contest that you're in, and it could contain fucking anyone practically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite criticism of content is like, oh, these guys just keep all the good players to themselves. Like I have some kind of like fortune ball. I can tell, like, oh, I know things distinctly enough that like this guy is gonna do well and this guy is not, so I'm gonna hype this guy. Like, it's like I have no idea, Like, yeah,
right. Well, I've always said one of my biggest wins was with Garrett Temple at 2% owned, putting up 45 points for the Grizzlies, and he was 3,700. And people asked, like, what put you on to Garrett Temple? I go, nothing. He was 3,700 and a small forward, and on that construction. Yeah. He had a median of like 19, and it fit into that lineup, and he just so happened to have a 95th percentile outcome. But like, I didn't specifically like, oh, this is a good spot for Garrett Temple. It's like, no, that's the way the math worked out, and he was the guy that was in there.
Yeah, like, so 18 or 19 is like a special projection for me in NBA, because so many times I'll be running lineups, right? And there's a change in the last 10 minutes. And it's like, oh, this guy's moving into the starting lineup. He's 3,500 on FanDuel, or he's 3,300 on DraftKings. Like, what's his projection? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. 19, right? Like, and I know like 18 or 19 is going to get me that player in some amount of lineups, but not too many. Just the way I'm running my lineups. So yeah.
Right, and those types of, and if he gets 25 or 27, like typically those are the lineups that have studs. Like those are the stars and scrubs types of constructions. So if you happen to have that guy at 3% owned that goes for 28 at 3,300, but you have Giannis plus LeBron in your lineup, and Giannis and LeBron both go for 70 plus, like he's the core that you needed that 3,300. Like in order to get that lineup construction, you needed that guy. And but the thing is, when you project it out, you know how many that guys there could be that are like when you say 19, it's like, dude, on a 10-game slate, there could be like 10 or 15 of like someone that's like 26 minutes and barely like 0.7 fantasy points per minute. And it's like, if he happens to walk into more minutes or someone else gets into foul trouble, like that could be the guy. But like, dude, feel free to try to fortune tell who that guy's going to be. But if you're building lineups with those constructions, you're naturally going to get 4% of this one, 5% of that one. So when people see your lineup, SquirrelPatrol won $100,000, and he had John Concher in there, right? And people are like, what put you on John Concher? And it doesn't amaze it. At least it amazes me when people just don't believe. Where it's just like, well, that's just how it ended up. Like, it's like, what do you mean you didn't know? Like, no, like, John Concher was in 2 of 150 lineups, and that's the lineup and my strategy worked. He happened to be the guy that fit in, and they're like, no, it can't just be that. There has to be some type of secret sauce. And you're like, there is no secret sauce.
No, yeah. I think my live final win, like I had Dilson Herrera is like the guy that always is my guy. That's that example. He was 1% owned in the live final, and he hit a home run. And people are like, "What put you on to Dilson Herrera?" He was minimum priced. I had 3,500 left or whatever, and I had to fill second base.
Right, and it's a weak position as it is. Right, second base is a weak position in MLB, the middle infield position. So, like, because you have to think in terms of relatively, like. In baseball or in basketball, when there's a very weak position, it's not like you have to win the position by that much. We see that with tight end in football, where it's like as long as no other tight end, as long as, Kelsey doesn't go off for 28 or Waller goes off for 28, like you could win with a 7 in your tight end spot if the highest scoring tight end is only 12, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's what a $2,500 tight end in DraftKings means. I don't like Travis Kelce. Doesn't necessarily mean I love that $2,500 tight end, right? But when that guy scores like 3 touchdowns, everyone's like, "What kind of magic did you, like how did you know?" Like I just didn't like Travis Kelce.
Right. You thought he was overowned, and you thought the better constructions were punting with tight end.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in playing DFS for the past 2 years, I know that you have a background. You went to business school, so you know something about finance. And the past year, I've gotten more into the Stock market, and obviously that's big news. GameStop, right? Everyone, Bitcoin. Oh my God, Elon tweeted Bitcoin's. Tesla bought Bitcoin apparently, and like it just like you could just throw. If you're putting money in the stock market and your portfolio is not going up, to me that's the equivalent of like if you're playing against someone that is putting all injured players in their head-to-head and you're losing, like you probably should quit DFS. But the economics of playing, because you play 150 lineups, you're playing high volume. You're much less of a nit, I guess, than I am.
Right, I guess, yeah.
I guess. I mean, in comparison. It's like when I did play large field GPPs, like 50 lineups, 75 lineups. Like I'd rather build 50 of the best lineups than 150, and I may have to prune some here. 653. I who knows? I need to change stuff out, and then maybe I'm not making good lineups. How do you treat your play? Like, because I preach a lot about I preach a lot about stuff that a financial advisor would. If you were investing into any type of assets, like how do you treat your play, especially with the volatility of playing DFS, where it's where your wife isn't nervous?
Well, my wife's nervous.
Okay,
there's no question. But there is a thought, right? Like, so stock portfolio theory, right? The more you diversify your portfolio, like the better chance you have at like risk-free return, or like the better your return is compared to the risk in your portfolio. So like I do think of that sometimes. So when we talk about like the portfolio strategy with lineups, right? Like I've got a portfolio of 150 lineups. So and the more I diversify, I think like the less risky it is. Because like I'll have sometimes huge days. Like I'll enter like a huge, like $30,000, you know, um, uh, pool on tournament on FanDuel, right? Like the alley oop at $1,500 when putting like 22 lineups. So it's like $33,000. Like I do not want to lose all $33,000, right? So I'm not going to have 100% of any player. So I'm diversifying as much as I can to make sure I just don't have those. Yeah, I might enter like $33,000 in a tournament, and that'd be like probably about the most I would put in. But like, I want to make sure my lineups are diversified enough that I'm going to be getting some money back no matter what happens.
Right, but is that based on the allocation that you have on a daily basis? Because I mean, to me, the risk that you have in a day slate, in a portfolio on a day slate, should be proportional to the inverse, truthfully, inversely proportional to the amount that you're allocating. So, for instance, but people naturally think the opposite way. They go, well, if you're gonna, let's say you have whatever X bankroll, right, and you're playing seriously, so the bankroll matters. If you're playing 10% of your bankroll per slate, you probably should be as diversified as you possibly can, because 10% of is that's hefty amount percent
Yeah.
of your bankroll. Yet, if you're playing 1% of your bankroll per slate, you don't have to be. If you want to have a non-diverse strategy, well, because the risk of ruin on that one slate is only 1% of your bankroll. So if you put in $1,000 and get zero back, that's much different than putting in $10,000 and getting zero back, because that represents 10% of your bankroll. So I'm not saying that you necessarily have like a direct, like exact calculation, but do you agree with, like, because you're putting in $33,000 worth of lineups, you're going to be more diversified. Yet on a slate, if you're playing like, oh, I'm playing a $1,500 qualifier, and like, yeah, I'm playing 3 entries into that or something like that. It's like, if I want to have the same, unique 2v2s and all of
Yeah.
them lose, it's like, well, $4,500 is much less percent of my bankroll than 33,000 is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think that's a really good way to think of it. And like sometimes I think of it in terms of like, do I want to have X amount of money behind a certain player, right? Because like anything can happen. So like if I'm like I think about if I'm putting in $1,000 and I'm gonna have 80% DeMarcus Cousins, like do I want to have $800 worth of DeMarcus Cousins? Or is that too much? Maybe that's not enough, right? Like maybe depending on the way DeMarcus Cousins been priced on FanDuel recently, like maybe I want to have even more. But yeah, I mean, I'll think of it in terms of those. Like maybe if it's like Denzel Valentine or something, right? Like, do I want to have $8,000 worth of Denzel Valentine tonight? Like last night, that was a bad decision. But yeah, so I think probably the more of your bankroll that you're putting in, the more diversified you want to be, and the reverse is true too. Like if you're kind of just playing a little bit of your bankroll, then yeah, you can go 100% behind any player or any strategy or whatever it is.
Right, you can take the riskiest strategies. I mean, but you see how people view it the opposite way, right? They're
Yeah.
going to play a large field contest, the Micro Millions yesterday on DraftKings. It's a $4 contest, and someone's like, I'm going to play one lineup, right? People go, I'm going to play one lineup into some ridiculously large field GPP, and because I only have one lineup, I'm going to play as safe as possible because that's my only
Right.
lineup. When in fact, you should be thinking the reverse and go, because it's my only lineup, I should be as risky as possible, because the $4, it only represents this small portion of my net worth or bankroll or whatever you want to say, that I want to maximize the chance of me winning $100,000 rather than maximize my chance of getting, $6. Because
Yeah.
going from 4 to 6, when let's say you have a $5,000 bankroll, Like, so what's the big deal about going from 4 to 6? If you lose $4, what the fuck does it matter? That's less than 1%. Like, but if you were playing $1,000 worth of stuff, then I can understand. Well, maybe I need to build some safer lineups. But people view the 150 maxers as the ones that you get to make crazy lineups. But you're actually explaining how the more volume that you put in, the more you have to concern yourself over even having less win equity, just so you have like more total equity of the prize pool, just in case you're wrong, so you get something back.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, not every tournament is a tournament where I'm putting in a huge amount of money, but like, yeah, I mean, you've got to be concerned. Like, you're putting in 150 times the entry fees of somebody that's putting in one entry, right? So yeah, so in some cases, like, you're playing safer than the guy that can put in just one entry.
Right, and but people have that misconception that they always win. And if you do the analysis, if you looked on Results DB, if you look through, and I know Bro on Twitter does analysis of this like almost every day, that it's like, oh, there were 86 150 maxers and only 7 made a profit, right?
Yeah.
They're right. And typically the ones that made a profit are ones that place the lineup somewhere in the top 10, right? So like that's where all the equity is, and people just like poo-poo that and still go, well, you're playing 150 lineups and how do you lose? And it's like dude, you have to, like, the difference between when I played large field, which I still may go back to, and you playing large field, I'm not saying it's better, it's just less risk, is that when I won the $9 slant in NFL this past season, like, I'm profitable for the whole season. Like, there's no chance for me not to be profitable because I'm not playing $25,000 of volume a slate. So like me binking once or twice a year is my year. Yet for you, binking once or twice a year could just be the break-even point.
Yeah, definitely. So I had a great January, great December, great January. And I did a thing because sports memorabilia is like becoming really popular, right? It's getting in a really overheated market. And I thought, like, I should buy one of these fancy uniform trading cards for every player that's won me $100,000, right? So I go to my Roto Tracker and I'm looking up, because what was me? I can't remember how many $100,000 tournaments I've won, right? So I go to
what
Roto
a good
Tracker.
problem to have. You lost track.
So I look it up and I'm like, oh yeah, it's actually more than I thought, right? Like, I'd have to buy a bunch of these guys' cards I realized, like, yeah, I have more $100,000 wins than I do like $100,000 in the bank, right? Because if you take away all the times that I've won more than $100,000, like, if you take away all of my $100,000 wins and above, I'm a losing DFS player, right? So like every time I posted a screenshot of like, oh, I won $100,000, it's not really $100,000, right? It's making up for some losses along the way. And that was kind of like, I didn't even realize that until last month. Like, if you had asked me, I would have thought like, oh, if you take away all the $100,000 wins, I'm still profitable.
No one is.
What? Yeah.
Because that's what you play for. I mean, that's the strategy you're employing. That's what you're playing for. All the equity is in the top spots. So if you're not hitting them, you can't possibly, with a 15% rake, be a profitable player. So when people are like, once you take away, like, I do the same thing. Once I take away my 100Ks, my 50Ks, my 20Ks, my 10K, all of that, it's like, oh, I'm up like over a 5-year period, I'm up like $8,000. Like, that's it. Like, but you're building lineups to, like, if you're not trying to hit those spots, it's like you can't be a profitable player. So to me, you view it as a negative, but that's how you should be playing.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta, it's first or last, right? Yeah, it's a crazy lifestyle, but yeah, it's true.
I'm glad you didn't say that, because I get what I do is I get the jerseys. I get the jersey of the lowest owned guy in the lineup when I win a large field GPP. so it's a little bit cheaper. So I get the $90, $100. So get that. So you wanted to get the memorabilia, but obviously, I mean, in basketball, I mean, you could obviously get one of these top shots talking about financial markets or whatever. I'm anti it or whatever, but from a financial perspective, like to me, like I view everything on the lens. Is it a nit way to think that like I view you watch the pregame show I do on Roto Grinders, and I publicly track my cash game play, and my cash game play is essentially the Roto Grinders projections. So like my theory behind what I'm doing is I'm trying to set a benchmark, very similar to the stock market, that people that trade, active traders, most don't beat the market. Like it would have been better off if you would just put it into the S&P 500, like, or VTI, or, just a Vanguard fund. And over the course of 5 years, you would have actually had more money than by going up and down like this. So like, I'm trying to test the theory of like, well, can I just, with diversification, just like you would do with the mutual fund and the contests across 3 sites, like what is the benchmark? Is the benchmark profitable? And then I have to determine whether or not my choices on a slate-to-slate basis is like active trading of, am I going to be able to beat that? If I can't beat my projected optimal over the long run, then why don't I just, I'm going to trade this stock and that stock and go and buy and sell, and then by the end of the year, I got a 6% return. And it's like, well, the S&P was up 9% over the year. Like it would have been better if you just literally dumped the money in, went on a vacation for a year, and then just came back to it. So like how do you view now that this is your job, and just like we're somewhat degenerates, right? Right? Yeah. We're always looking for like DFS is an investment, and you could take kind of your bankroll and go, oh, there's this cool thing going on over here. A new site opens up, right? That prop bets or something, you want to get a little dabble in there, you see some edge there. So it's not like we're not like void of like risk. We're still riskier. I'm a nit, but in the grand scheme of life, I'm probably a much riskier normal than my friend that has, a family and 2 kids and a mortgage and kids go to school and has a retirement fund. They look at me and I'm like, I'm the loose cannon, right?
Degenerate, yeah.
right. But in DFS, like I'm the nit. Like, do you, like in your play, do you view, like you're trying to judge your results in comparison to what? Like, what would you be considered to be like the benchmark in everything you do? Like, for instance, if I gave you the choice and said, you could either play DFS or you could put the money into a mutual fund, and at the end of the year, if you had more in the mutual, like, why would you be playing DFS? So like I view it that way also. The difference between that and DFS is that you're like, it's the opportunity cost. Like you could churn, like like it's got in the stock market, it would be called compounding, right? You get compounding works so much better in DFS because you get to compound daily versus in like the stock market, like nothing compounds daily. Like if you have a 5% ROI in Roto Tracker, that doesn't mean 5% on your initial investment. That means 5% on a daily slate by slate basis.
Yeah, like every time you play.
Right, and then if you're reinvesting your profits into increasing your play proportionally, like that graph is going to start going up and up exponentially. And that's why when I say that, like I started with $400 and now I'm close to 400,000, like that's not from like, oh, I won a $300,000 GPP once type of thing. Like it's because I started at the quarter arcade level, and then as I built up my bankroll, I started entering more. But all I'm doing is compounding that 5% edge, 7% edge, whatever the hell is going up. Is what I'm talking about, is that something you think about a lot? Do you approach your DFS play similar to the way that you would approach like any type of investment?
So for me, I think the opportunity cost is that I don't have a job. So, and I do have a wife. so like I have to explain basically to my wife, like I am not working my job because I can make X amount of money. I think, my theory is playing DFS. So if I don't hit what my old salary was, like with some amount for benefits, then it's like, well, when are you going back to get a job, right? So it's like that's my benchmark for success. Is like, did I make enough? And it is a kind of one of these arbitrary like January to January judgments, right? Like, but like, yeah, if I have a downswing, it's like, wow, like, have you heard anything from that company you were talking to, yeah, like a few months ago? So that's how I judge, I guess, success. That's my benchmark in
Well,
terms of.
I mean, I think it's similar to me. I mean, I always say that like my goal in life is to never have a real job. I don't need all the money. I live in Louisville. The standard of living is lower. Can I make $50,000 to $75,000 a year doing this? Playing on top of there's obviously content stuff. There's stuff that revolves around DFS. There may be new opportunities, preserving my bankroll. So maybe I can take 30,000 and put it into the stock market. Maybe some new prop site opens up and there's tons of overlay or edge. And I go, I'm going to take 10 grand and I'm going to see, maybe I could churn out. Maybe this flames away in 6 months, but over that time, maybe I made 5 or 6 grand. And I know that you obviously play much higher volume than I do, and you probably got paid in your job much higher than I got paid in my job. Uh, but do you think that too few professional? I want to highlight it. Not average players, but professionals. Only because I don't think these conversations. You don't see these conversations like what we're talking about. I don't. No one talks about as far as
Yeah.
just like how does this fit into like the investment in your life in general, like the why you play DFS, like as far as like as a job type of thing. That do you think that a lot of supposedly professional, and I'm using the term, it's kind of weird to say professional players, uh, how many do you think have a similar mindset, or do you feel that a lot of the the top players, professional industry, are like this is the fad now, and I'm gonna churn as much as I can, and then like get out and just find a place to put my money next, type of. Because I get the sense that either people have unrealistic expectations, the party's gonna last forever, this is gonna be for 20
Yeah.
years, or it's the opposite of like I gotta put as much as I can into the next 3 or 4 year period because the whole bubble's gonna burst, and then I'll find the next bubble.
I think it's somewhere in between. So I think I don't think things are gonna like burst in the next 3 or 4 years. Because I think like the first cavemen were like betting on like which cricket would run across the cave fastest, right? Like guys are gonna bet on sports. Right? Sports are always gonna exist in some form. People are always gonna bet on it in some form. And what we have with DFS is really like the peer-to-peer, right, betting where like I'm playing against somebody else's lineup, so I'm not playing against the house. And I think that'll continue. I don't see that stopping anytime soon. Um, you know, and I think there's a possibility it could get even bigger, right, with sports betting. Because I think if the whole pie is expanding, then like the DFS slice of the pie could be growing, but maybe not, right? And I think if it gets much smaller, then like, yeah, I want to get out, And I think a lot of the other players probably think the same way. So like yeah, I do it. Maybe there is this, yeah, probably more towards the view of I want to get as much out of it over the next few years, but I don't know that next few years time frame could be anything, right? Like I might stop playing in a few weeks if I like if I decide to, right, to decide to do something else, or if this gets much bigger, right? I might maybe like the first guys that started playing professional poker probably didn't think it was going to get much bigger, but it did. Maybe DFS is that way as well. I don't know.
Well, people think in terms of the boom was 2015. The boom was all of that. That there won't be another boom. Or the fact is that now we're getting slower growth. That in comparison, it's like relating the stock market like past this time, because now it's like there's free money everywhere. So like the I don't know when this bubble is going to burst, but like the dot com, I was involved in the stock trading sites during the first dot-com bubble. So, like, I was on Wall Street, I was a web developer, whatever, and, like, that from that point forward, like, once that bubble burst, everyone compared, like, well, you can't invest into tech stocks because the bubble's done. Yet, if you invested in Apple or Microsoft or anything, you'd have, like, 50x returns from that point. Like,
Yeah.
do you think that people that have played since the boom 2014, 2015 just have an unrealistic expectation? Like, everything seems like it's going down even when it's going up, only because, like, that unsustainable growth was never going to be the norm. And your outlook on DFS is that over the next 3, 5, 7 years, maybe 10-year time frame, is that we may be at the point that we were in 2015, in 2030. It's just it's going to take 10 years to get there. But we're going to be back at, we'll have live finals where first place is $5 to $10 million. It's just that, like, it'll take 10 years to get there.
Yeah, that perfectly describes my thinking, right? Like, yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that were here, like, were like veterans in 2015 and saw that huge amount of growth, and it's like, it's the party's over. Like, I think that was always unsustainable. Like, I think in 2015, FanDuel and DraftKings were just trying to get as many new users as they possibly could, right? They're just pouring like venture capital money into like marketing, but also like some of the marketing is like kind of intentional overlay with contests, right? And like these huge live finals that they could be losing money on, right? But it's a marketing event, and then that went way down. Like the prize pools for live finals, prize pools for everything went down. But like, I mean, I don't like DraftKings has $1 million to first place for the NBA live final this year. And that's like last year was 500,000. This year it's $1 million. I mean, it's a big difference. Like the NFL live final prize pool, it's $2 million this past year. It's $1 million to second place. Like that's not small money, right? So yeah, I mean, I think there's a possibility you're in a period of maybe more sustained growth. And I really like the tech analogy. We're about the same age. And like, so we've lived through some of the same bubbles, right? It was like the tech bubble in like the late 90s and early, like 2000, 2001, and then like immediately followed by the real estate bubble. And I noticed we're both sitting NBA top shots out, right? Like,
right. We're both sitting NBA, right. I feel like I've gone crazy. I mean, just like you went to business school, you studied finance. Me, I'm more of a self-taught, right? I was an honors math student. It's not like I'm dumb or anything. It's just that, I dropped out of high school, joined a startup, so I don't have formal education in most of this stuff. I learned by doing, and to me, I view NBA Top Shots as like it's not that I don't get the technology. It's that I like how is it not? It's I don't want to call it a Ponzi scheme, but like if the thing has first off, the thing has no utility, so it's only as valuable as what other people value it as. But when you say that phrase, that means that the only way that you could ever get value out of it is if by other people valuing it, which means you want to tell other people that it's valuable. So like that's where it breaks down to me that like I don't view like Bales or Peter Jennings as like, oh, they bought this and now they're pumping up the money. Like you could be excited about something. I'm excited about DFS, right? You come in and play DFS, and obviously if you're a bad player, I make more money because you're coming into the ecosystem. Now I'm trying to teach you how to play well, and hopefully, I still get better than you. I know that 95% of people that listen to this podcast will still not do it well, not listen to what we say, and just do whatever the fuck they want anyway. So I'm relying on that. But like from the Top Shots perspective, I just look and go, why would I put my money into an ecosystem where the only way to get value back is by finding someone that values it more than you? At some point, you run out of people.
So yeah, so I will admit that I don't know a ton about it because everything I've learned about it has made me think to myself, I don't need to research this anymore. Right.
Right.
Everyone I've talked to has the same exact story. She's like, oh, I thought this was crazy at first too, and I put in a little bit of money, and I started buying some cards, and like my portfolio's gone way up, right? Like I list, watched some YouTube videos, and I read a guy's blog on how to do this, and I've made really good investments with my cards, and like I've told a couple of friends, and their portfolios have gone up too. Like everybody's made money on this thing, right? Like
Well, they've made money on paper.
Right. Everybody's made money
you
on paper.
can't even goddamn withdraw. You've made money on paper.
You can't withdraw. like anyone, every new user, right? Every piece of marketing they do that results in new users. Everybody writing on Twitter like, hey, you got to check this out, results in more people putting in money into the marketplace. Nobody can take money out. So the upward, the pressure on prices for these cards is all up because like you're not going to have money sitting on the site not buying cards with it, right? So like everyone's cards are going up in value and nobody can withdraw. Like what happens when the first person can, I guess some specialized users can withdraw, which is even scarier, right? The idea that some of these like power users or whatever are able to get their money out, but like the average person cannot get their money off the site. So like, and more and more people keep piling money onto the site. So like, yeah, it's not a surprise that like everybody's made money, but as soon as the average user can, everybody's got the same plan, right? Like I put in $1,000. I bought some cards. My portfolio is now worth $5,000. I'm just going to take $1,500 off the site, right, and make sure I've got a guaranteed profit.
It's going to be a run on the bank. That ends up being a run on the bank.
I noticed that like the last thing I saw in withdrawals was it's going to be like a rolling randomized basis or something. Like yeah, they can't let everyone withdraw at once. Yeah, the expression on your face. Basically the same expression on mine. Like I don't know. We'll see what happens.
but I have a problem also with this. Like any economic system, there's supply and demand. So like I understand the main reason to bring it back to DFS, why I like teaching people about DFS. A lot of sharp players have privately said to me, "You shouldn't be making these players better. You're making." Yeah. And I always say that 95% of people don't fucking pay attention and they're not going to do it. There are poker books. You could go out and be a world-class poker player now. If you don't have the discipline to do it, it doesn't matter that the material's out there. But the more healthy the ecosystem, like the more that people are enjoying, I want, just like in poker, I don't want bad players to lose quickly. I want them to lose as slow as possible because we need to keep the ecosystem big enough for us all to feed on. To put in a thing. But in Top Shots, like the supply is up to whatever the fuck the company wants to do. I mean, I used to collect baseball cards. So like it always comes down to the 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. It always comes down to that era of sports cards of you have a company that all they have to do is print something and someone will pay them. They put the Top Shots. They put out, we're releasing 10,000 packs, and people are they're just collecting money from out of thin air, and I'm supposed to believe that this company is no, we're going to keep a very limited supply so they maintain its value, and it's like I'm too cynical on people that if they could just print money out of thin air, eventually, even a year or two from now, we even see. I mean, I don't keep up with it. I only keep up with it on Twitter and everything. That 4 weeks ago. You could turn a $9 pack into $60 because even the commons were just like okay, I could sell this for $20, because that was like the minimum price. But then it turns into, well, now that they're adding more types of cards and everything, now the commons are like, well, it's not special anymore. These cards are special. And then you go to the next, then we're the limited edition, whatever the hell, and then now everyone wants to put money into that. And like at some point, there's too much supply, and who knows? You could say, well, no, the company will never do that. Yeah, fuck you, the company will never do that. That's how they make money. So, if you don't tell me, if you say, I want you to invest in an asset, and I'm not going to tell you how scarce it's going to be in the future, like, why do I want to pay a premium for that? That may be a speculative. If you put a couple of bucks into Bitcoin back in 2011, and it's just like, I'll just throw in a couple of bucks. It's worth God knows how much money now. But at least it's just a couple of bucks. But I mean, people are buying the $15,000 moments, and they could literally make 50 more of. There's nothing that stops all the serial number. Well, they'll make more serial numbers. That's the part I don't get of how could you trust if the value holds up when there's a Fed. Essentially, NBA Top Shots is the Fed. They could print whatever amount of money they want. So what the fuck am I doing?
And at the end of the day, it is just the sports memorabilia market, right? Like, and we're about the same age, right? I remember the mid '80s, right, with baseball card collecting, and you had Fleer and Donruss and Upper Deck and Topps, right? And all these companies started, and that's another thing, right? Like somebody else, like what about NFL Top Shops, right? Like some other companies coming out with like NFL highlights or MLB highlights. And all of these card companies started flooding the market in the mid '80s with all of these cards, and it went down in value. It's like every 18 years, the sports card market or sports memorabilia market goes nuts. The one thing I put on Twitter about NBA Top Shot was like I was talking to a friend of mine, a childhood friend, about these crazy kids are putting all this money into like these video highlights, and he reminded me something I totally forgotten about. ETOPS in 2002, like it came out because like all of the young men with like discretionary had been doing stock, like tech stocks, stock investing, and it was like you had to get the initial public offering for the tech company, and Topps started doing ETOPS, which was a virtual trading card. Like you could never take delivery of the card if you didn't want to, just like you don't have to take delivery of a stock certificate, right? And they would IPO certain players, and you would have to like rush to the site and go get on the site when they had an IPO for like this certain player to get the cards in 2002. It was the exact same thing, or a very, very similar thing to NBA Top Shot. My friend reminded me like we had tried to corner the market on this one player, right? And like take delivery of the cards and burn all the physical cards. So the last few cards we had were the most valuable. Like, and I'm like, I did. Like, we fell for that in 2002. But it's like, every like 18 to 20 years, the sports memorabilia market goes crazy. Everybody pours their money into it, thinking they're going to get rich. And like sports memorabilia is worth something, but it's not worth like these crazy amounts. Like, not every guy across America is going to suddenly buy $20,000 worth of like jerseys or video highlights this month. So we'll see.
Well, it could be. They could with the amount of money, right? Money's
it's
free now. They're going to put another $2 trillion into the economy. This party's going on. It's going to. I'm just trying to figure out when the hell this fucking thing is going to come down.
There are a lot of things that are getting frothy right now, right? Like a lot of things seem to, but we'll see what happens. We got more stimulus checks on the way, so everything should be fine.
Do you think in this period in the market with what's going on, do you still think that it's amazing for me to say that playing DFS playing DFS, can it survive a market downturn? It's to me, it's an intellectual challenge of like when the money has to go somewhere. Cash is not worth anything now. Like cash is like if you have a savings account, like it's just you're losing money by having it in there, right? But so in an economic time now, you're the other person that studied this more than I did. So like I'm just making based on like the concepts that I know that. Wouldn't you believe that with people having cash and nothing to do with it, this is why real estate's going up, every type of asset's going up. Do you think that's a benefit for DFS? Or do you think that DFS is better during an economic downturn? Because you would have to think that you make most of your money off of dumb people and they need discretionary income because it's more of an entertainment product. But would you make more? But the problem is that if I can make more putting the money into the stock market than playing DFS, doesn't that also make the market for DFS go down?
I don't think people think of it that way. And this conversation takes some dark turns, right? Because like I think like historically, gambling tends to do much better during economic downturns, right? And then there's like
which is so ridiculous to say. I mean, it really doesn't make rational sense. Why?
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's kind of depressing, right? Like people kind of start to feel on their like last edge, right? I got nothing. You
got nothing to lose. Right? Why not?
Yeah, like and then so it becomes this like lottery culture, and I think it's like then that maybe helps the DFS sites, but it's kind of a dark thought. Like people that can't really afford to be playing DFS, like piling money into it is some kind of like last hope to
Yeah, but let's take that dark turn.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting because it comes up in poker A lot.
Mhm.
They're a lot. A lot. If you play poker for a living, you most likely at some point, at once a week at least, maybe, if you're at like a fairly popular area, casino, card rooms, whatever, you quite possibly are playing with someone who's playing with their rent money. Like
Yeah.
it's inevitable. Like that someone is either addicted or in over their head or desperate, like you said. And to me, my attitude is that I can't think about that. Like it was their choice to play this game, and it's my job to. I mean, I'm going to play it as well as possible. It's caveat emptor at that point. But
Right.
DFS is the same way. That I guarantee you there are people that you have won money against. That when you won $100,000, portion of that money was from some 19-year-old kid or something that this was part of their college tuition that that they're down $15,000 playing DFS because they're trying to chase their losses. Like me personally, I don't know. Does it say bad about me? I don't see any moral judgment against me on that because it's not. That's your choice. That's not mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately my attitude. I probably wouldn't say that out loud, right? But yeah, that's ultimately my attitude. I think with DFS, you don't see the people, right? Like poker, like if you're sitting across the table from somebody, like then it's a little bit like more literally it's right in front of you. Whereas at DFS, like I don't know, these are usernames, right? Like I don't know, DFS whatever's user handles. Right? Just username. Like my second live final, I led the FanDuel NFL Finals in New York, and they took us to this physical sports book in the Meadowlands, right? And I invited all these friends to go with me, right? Because I had 5 seats for the NFL Final, and FanDuel was treating us like VIPs, so I had like family members there and stuff. And we go to this physical sports book, and this guy is driving by, and it's like dilapidated car, right? It's like barely running, and he like yells something out the window to us. Like what is he saying? And, like he yells again, I winner, And we finally hear he's saying, I need a winner. And he's saying, just give me a winner, man. I just need any winning bet. Just give me a winning bet. He's like, I can't go home until I get a winner. like this guy could not, was afraid to go home and like face his wife or whatever until he had won his money back. It was like one of the most depressing things I've ever seen in my entire life. But it's like, and then like, I think about that sometimes with DFS, right? Like, am I taking money from that kind of person? I don't know. Like, hopefully not. But yeah, I mean, I can't control it. So like, I don't. And then I wouldn't say I don't feel bad about it, but like I'm hoping I'm taking $5 from hundreds of thousands of people rather than like 50,000 from somebody that can't afford it.
Right. You're just some Joe Schmo on the couch with $5 of discretionary income. It's like I'm going to take a shot at this lottery, and if it's no big deal. But how do you, on the other end of the spectrum? We know plenty of people. We see because we do content. We converse with people, even good players. Like you're talking about, all I need is a winner, right? I can't go home until I break even. Like, but you see plenty of people, even good players, that the player that I'm 100% on got injured in the first quarter. Time to tilt enter the late slate. Like that type of like I don't everyone okay, let's just put it forward. No one is immune to it completely. Right?
Yeah.
No, like tilt and making rash decisions or trying to get your money back, those types of things. Even me. It's I'm not 0%, but I'm fucking close to it. How do you, it doesn't seem like you're the type of person that is just like, it's a bad day and you move on to the next day. Like it's not the type of thing where if you have a really bad day, it means that tomorrow that means that it's Thunderdome time, right? Like it's like like you don't seem like the type that would be that much of an issue.
I think like I've got certain contests that I'm going to enter, especially like at this point I'm pretty like almost automated, right? Like I know what contests I'm entering on FanDuel. I know what contests I'm entering on DraftKings. And if I'm going to go more than that, there's got to be a reason why. So like, and so sometimes like special contests, I'll go in. Like if like FanDuel's been giving away tickets to a contest for months, right? I'll go play that contest. I'll max enter it, and I'm not necessarily max entering because I won satellite tickets, but I'm max entering it because they gave a bunch of satellite tickets away, and I know people aren't going to even enter a line, right? Like people forget about their satellite tickets, like, and there's a DFS attrition, right? Like people die, people win satellite tickets and then die, or they stop playing.
You talked
DFS.
about it down. Well, hold on. We said we're going down a dark path talking about you winning rent money, and now you're like, I'm fine with winning money from dead people.
Yeah. Well, they miss it less than the people need the rent money, right? But if they won satellite tickets, it's not even money that they put in, right?
I picture it. This is how I picture you now. I picture the Sixth Sense, the kid from the Sixth Sense, right? He looks over and says, "I see dead money."
Yeah, right. It's literally dead money, and in some of these satellites. If they've been running satellites for months, there's users. Just the odds say, if there's tens of thousands of people in the contest or hundreds of thousands of people in the contest, some of those people are not still with us. So like I enter the special, but so if I'm going to go over like my daily apportionment or my what I'm going to enter on a contest, it's going to be some kind of special situation like that.
It's not the type of thing where it's like I've had three losing days in a row, so that means like I got to double down. Like that doesn't happen.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, you say that, but we see plenty of people that do that.
Yeah, I mean that's not a healthy way to live. There's this question, right, of like when you're running hot, right? You don't if you're running hot,
But hold on, is there such a thing as running hot? Or is that just variance?
Yeah.
Are you? Is it because you're playing better, or it's just variance? It's just good variance.
I think it's probably 99% variance. I think there's some amounts of maybe you kind of latch onto a situation, especially like basketball or something. Like this team's playing a little differently than people realize.
Right.
So
it's like you're picking up some, like, okay, the Pelicans started out playing slow and now they're playing faster, and people even the projections haven't even. Like around the industry haven't adjusted to that, or they haven't adjusted to the fact that this rotation has changed. So people are projecting like 28 minutes when they really should be projecting 31 minutes. So, but to me, that's not like you're running like there's no such thing because people are, I'm running hot. So that like, dude, your results yesterday from the basketball perspective, like have no relation. It's like running hot at the roulette wheel, like that, like one roll doesn't have anything to do with the next one.
Yeah, so I guess like when I say running hot, I mean maybe more like you've had a great month and you can put in a little bit more, because you've got more money, right? Your bankroll is higher than it used to be. You can enter a little bit more than you could, than a month ago or whatever.
Right, you're compounding. You're playing because a percent of your bankroll and it's moving up. Right.
Yeah.
So you're just being responsible. It's not because it's like you're running hot. It's because, well, if your bankroll goes up from 50,000 to 60,000, 10% of that or 5% of that or whatever is just going to be a higher number. But we see plenty of people that you see a lot of times with more casual players. Like listen to this story. This story you've seen like 100,000 times before. Maybe not 100,000. Someone gets lucky. You see one of these two things. Either someone gets lucky, wins $100,000, withdraws 99,000 of it, and just continues playing whatever stakes that they were playing, and then just uses that money to whatever. Like that's to us, that's the worst thing to happen because that money just leaves the ecosystem completely. Right? Now, if you have an edge and you're playing seriously, you're not taking the 99,000. You may take it out of your DraftKings account, but you're not taking it out of your bankroll. You're now compounding your edge by now moving up in stakes appropriately. But we also see plenty of times where someone wins $100,000 and literally the next slate they're 150 in contests and they're in the 888 and whatever, and then like a month later it's like, what happened to that guy, right? We've seen that plenty of times. I mean, you see that in poker.
But some yes, famous incidents with that. Yeah, guys going on forums. I'm the king, and then it's like a month later, they're yeah, it's disaster. So yeah. Yeah, so I forget what we were even talking about.
Right, but I mean, I just wanted to use this episode more to get into the mindset of quote a professional player, one that plays like Eric. Like Eric plays higher stakes than I do, but he plays like the single entry three man. He goes in his lane that he has an edge in. You're more of a large field player, but still someone that plays high volume. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm still in the top 1% of people that play I mean, to most average people, if I'm saying I'm playing $3,800 worth of volume tonight, like that's a lot of fucking money. To most people, that's a lot of fucking money. But maybe not as much in comparison to you. Just in the mindset of playing on a day-to-day basis, in the as a profession, as an investment, and not necessarily that that you're just sitting on the couch drinking beer, entering lineups, and like whatever happens. That there's some type of plan and method of the investment outside of just building lineups. I'm just talking about just the mentality of your macro strategy of why you play DFS. And to you, it's very similar to me. Like, how do I not have the same jobs that I used to have and make the same amount of money? But people would love that. Like, people listening, like, I'd love to quit my $60,000 a year job and just make $60,000. If I could just make $60,000 a year playing DFS, I'd prefer that. I don't need to make $1 million. I don't need to make live finals. Don't need to do any of that. But the switch to go to how do you play recreationally, where you're just like, oh, I'll build a couple of lineups. Maybe I'll play tonight. Maybe I'll play tomorrow. Maybe I'll sit this slate out. Maybe I'll play the showdown. Maybe like that. To me, that's not a business plan. Like, how do you treat your DFS play more so that a lot of top players do treat it like it is a macro strategy type of business plan, but no one gets to hear the mentality behind doing so.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I quit my job, and as soon as I quit my job because I had just gone on a tremendous streak, right? Where I won a live final, had a bunch of like $100,000 wins in the a couple of months after that, and then it was like I quit my job because I can obviously make a lot more money, playing DFS than I can in my job, and I immediately went on a huge tailspin, right? Like as you would kind of expect, right? Like it's obviously not going to keep going, keep doing that well, and so then by the end of that first year, it was like, okay, I need to do something to turn this around, and I became like much more methodical. Like I never used Roto Tracker until the beginning of last year, and I really took a close look at like what contests do I do well at, what sports do I do well at, like what sites do I do better. It turns out like I didn't really know this, but I do much better at DraftKings baseball than I do FanDuel baseball. I have no idea why, right? But it was obscured by the fact that I won the baseball live final in FanDuel, right? So my GPP on Roto Tracker showed this really high amount, but I was like, actually take that away, and I do much better. Like, you look at the 1% graphs, right, on Roto Tracker, much better on DraftKings. And like I took a really close look at that, and then I allocate my money accordingly, right? So and I say like, well, basketball is clearly my best sport. I should be maximizing, my bankroll in basketball, but I should be, cutting way back on football. Like it turns out, like football probably my worst sport in terms of an ROI. Actually, it's unfortunate I just finished my best like NFL season, but like taking a really close look at how am I doing in these contests. Turns out I do surprisingly well in showdowns. I never would have expected that I do as well in showdown or better as I do like in the classic contests. So like I think having that kind of mentality and like knowing that you can't just enter certain contests because you like to read the content on those contests or you enjoy the sport, whatever the case may be. It turns out, then we had the pandemic hit as well, right? And like sports went away for a couple of months, and we're all playing like Korean League baseball and MMA and golf. And like I thought I would have a big edge on Korean League baseball because you had to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and set your lineups. And I thought people were going to reserve lineups and they're not going to get up in time. And it turns out I overslept my lineups twice, right? In the course of 2 weeks. And I'm like,
you were the one
I'm
that did it, right?
I'm the guy that's not getting up. And that was the end of my Korean League baseball DFS career, right? But then it turned out MMA, I was doing really well. And like it turns out I was able to like kind of figure out MMA, DFS fairly quickly. Golf, I still have not figured out. I do terrible golf.
That's the same thing with me.
Yeah.
I played golf for 2 years. I had like one decent finish, and then most of the time, and then I use game. And I'm like, okay, I'm just anyone that's over 20% owned. There's no way that they could. And then for some reason, the chalk every hits the one lineups that I got. I'm golf. There's too much variance. Just like,
Yeah.
but I think the point that you're making is that doesn't mean that you don't play golf. It just means that you would allocate much less of your bankroll to that. But during basketball season, you're like, I'll get as much action as I can. NFL, maybe you come down some more. That it's not this type of thing where like, oh, you have X amount of bankroll, you're always going to do this and always this way. It's reallocating. I showed on the pregame show this morning where, I mean, out of time of this recording, that on FanDuel, in cash games, it's bananas. In DraftKings, it's like right in the middle. And then someone asks, it's like, why don't you just put all your money into FanDuel? And I'm like,
I heard that question. Yeah.
Right. But the point is that that could easily just be variance. I still want the diversification, but you saw that I'm it's like just like rebalancing your portfolio in the stock market. Like I need to start the edge. If the edge is there, I need to start shifting more money in that direction. But it doesn't mean to just like, well, after 50 slates, I know exactly dude, 50 slates is barely a sample size. And you don't want to make a rash decision of like, that's like I'm running hot. It's like, well, you're running hot on FanDuel. It's like, so I could go also lose a month straight on FanDuel. Like that's still within the range of outcomes. So I don't want to just like, oh, I'm going to pour all my money into FanDuel for the downswing. Well, that's not a good thing. You want to buy the dip, if anything, right? Because that would be the opposite of like, really, I should be playing more on DraftKings so I could get even there. It's like none of this matters. Like you're coming up with psychological reasons of like, well, DraftKings is due. You should put more money in there to buy like, dude, the past slates don't affect today's slate. It's just that if I have a bigger edge on one place, I should start proportionally moving more of my money there. Proportionally. But not John, you're never going to make a decision where like you looked at RotoTracker and said, well, fuck it, I'm all in on basketball and I'm never playing NFL football again, right? Like it'll just shift in different directions.
So we're like the CEOs of our own little like DFS companies, right? Like we're allocating the company's capital in the most efficient way we think, and there isn't a clear right answer, but like we'll look at as much data as we can and try to make the best decisions we can. It's like how can we get the best return off of this this money that we have, which are the company money. In our case, is the bankroll, right? And like I think you did like your thought process is exactly what I would do. Is I seem to have more of an edge on FanDuel cash than I do like DraftKings cash in terms of like you're tracking so far. So you're like, I'm gonna take a little bit more and shift it into FanDuel cash because like I can possibly get a better return there, but we don't know, right? Like they actually do the opposite, like 401k rebalancing, right? Like they which are like mutual funds because you're trying to rebalance and keep the same proportion of like mutual funds in your portfolio or whatever it is.
Right. I mean,
like in this case, I would do the same thing you're doing, just put a little bit more into FanDuel cash.
Right. You want to balance out your risk appropriately, the same way that you do in your stock portfolio. So it seems like even though we both play different types of contests, different types of styles, right? You're playing 150 here. I'm playing a little bit more single entry 3-max now. Yet I did play I'm looking for where's I'm ultimately. I mean, I think we both are. Like the goal is to make the most amount of money for the least amount of risk, right? I like from a really macro sense is that like you can make the most amount of money with a lot of risk, right? Like you could go balls to the wall and end up at the end of the year up $5 million. I mean, that can happen. Or you're going to be the guy in the car
Right.
yelling at me going,
Need a
I need a winner.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I think, something that people overlook, and because I took like a bunch of finance classes, and it's like beaten into me, and something like if you're following like stock investing, then yeah, the concept of risk goes along with possible reward, right? So like if you can make the same return but you're minimizing your risk, that's a huge advantage, right? That's something definitely worth pursuing that I think a lot of people that are putting money into FanDuel and DraftKings, even people that are maybe consuming content, aren't necessarily thinking in terms of risk, right? They're like, well, if you know this player is going to do well, why don't you put everything behind them, right? Like, well, it's too risky, right? I want to be maximizing my return, for the risk that I'm taking.
Right, and nothing's for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
like there's no locks. There's no if there were locks, and I also say this: if there were locks, I would never tell you because like that's how I would make my money, right? Like if there was a set, people ask you, John, right? They ask you probably all the time, what are your settings, right? Like what are the like because we do premium content and you'll do some lineup HQ stuff for roto grinders. And a lot of the questions are like, well, how many unique players do you use? How much
Yeah.
randomness do you use? How much do you did? And I always say it's a shitty answer. I mean, but it's the correct answer of, well, it depends on the slate. Like my settings could look different every single fucking slate. I mean, like it's what is the strategy in the portfolio of lineups that I'm making, and the tool is just there to be efficient for me.
Yeah.
But like if you could hand build 150 lineups as quick as you could use lineup HQ, like you would be much more accurate hand building. Like you would prefer doing it that way, but just it's untenable to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the best analogy for like tournament play, like FanDuel and DraftKings, is like hitting in baseball, right? Like where if you're successful like 35% of the time, you're a Hall of Famer, right? And I take the same approach, and I think hitting in baseball can be incredibly mentally taxing for that same reason. Like yeah, like the majority of time you're gonna fail. Like tournament play in FanDuel and DraftKings, like the majority of the time you're gonna fail. And I'm one of those hitters, right, that's constantly making adjustments. Like I'm not going to face the same pitcher and have this, I'm constantly tweaking my stance, constantly like looking for different pitches or whatever. Like I don't take the same strategy like for two different slates ever. I'm constantly adjusting. I'm constantly adjusting like my projection models, constantly like adjusting I'll adjust like how I enter contests and FanDuel because I want to be able to like to drag and drop when I've got my lineups. Like I want to be able to do that in as little time as possible, right? So like I'll enter my contests in FanDuel in a different order. So like if I'm short on time and I just gotta cut and paste and drag and drop all of my lineups into the upload file, I can do that within 10 seconds if I need to, right? So yeah, I'm constantly adjusting things, and there's no like magical settings like, oh yeah, I just set it and forget it, and that's how I run my lineups.
Right, because well, the point is that if there was one, no one would ever tell you because it
Yeah,
would be the type of I always say that if there was such a thing like that, I would not be on this podcast. You would not know what my face is. I wouldn't even be on Twitter because I wouldn't want anyone to know who the hell is Blender HD on top of the contest every
right.
goddamn day, and I'll just collect millions of dollars. Like if there was one, rationally that's what I should be doing.
Yeah, that's why I don't do coaching. People often ask, like, how much do you charge for coaching? So, like, I do not want to take your money from you in an hourly format and then beat you in FanDuel, right?
Right.
Like that would be terrible. So, like, I'm sorry, you can consume my content on Roto Grinders. Like, yeah, I do not, yeah, I don't do like hourly coaching or anything
Right.
like
Well,
that.
the same reason why I made the course. Like people were, can you like? No, I can't. Number one, I can't scale that from a business perspective. So it's like
Yeah,
here's a 15-hour thing. It's everything that I know, and there you go. And then I'm also in the Roto Grinders Premium Discord, where it's yes, it may not be one-on-one coaching, but if you, my email box is open. I do respond to emails, questions at theoryofdfs.com. But like I'm the same way as you. Like number one, I always joked, John, because people I get DMs. I've gotten these for years. Can you give me some lineups? Can you like right? Because can you get it's the guy from the car? I need a
right.
winner.
Just give me a winner. Just give me a
Right.
winner.
They give me a winner. Uh people and I said, I will literally build all of your lineups for you. Like literal. Like I will everything that I would normally do for a slate every 365 days a year, I will do from you. All you have to do is give me $75,000. So you
Yeah.
give me $75,000, I will not risk any of my money. You could play. I will just build and say under your account. Like that to me, that's risk-free $75,000. That's my goal. And there you go. Oh, that's ridiculous. You can't give me a lineup for 15. But like it's wise. If the lineup was worth that, then why would I be giving it to you? I mean, it always comes back down to like why would I coach you on a slate? Can you go through what you're doing on a specific slate? This is the main reason why I review slates, and I don't like doing shows at 5:30, 6 o'clock. I don't like doing picks or stuff type of shows. It's like it's not because I'm holding the strategy back. It's like I don't even know what. A lot of times I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing then, and then what I'm going to be doing for the contest that I'm in may be a bad strategy for what you're doing, and also we're in the same contests. And it's like that's even the showdown stuff. Like when I do the showdown contest, like I'm going for uniqueness. So for me to go on a show and then like I play less I truthfully I play the small field contests when I'm on showdown shows because like every unique lineup burns me. And if I'm going to be honest, because I'm going to give exactly what I think. But if I'm going to go on and say I'm going to play more Brady in the captain. I'm going to play more like I'm giving an audience of hundreds or thousands like the correct strategy for uniqueness, but now like it's burning all of my edge doing so. So I'm going to play a contest where uniqueness isn't as much of a factor. So I'm still giving out good information, but I'm not giving away the edge in doing so, right? I'm going to talk all about GPPs and here's the strategy, but I'm just playing cash tonight, right? Like before crunch time where I'm not going to risk GPP lineups a half an hour. Maybe you do that. Like I'm not gonna switch all that. So I'm just playing. I just have my one cash lineup, maybe one GPP lineup, but I could still then give advice, exactly what I think, without having to like. I'm not competing against like that conflict of interest isn't there anymore.
Yeah, it's an interesting conflict that you bring up, right? Because like I do the crunch time shows sometimes, and it's bad in two ways, right? Because you're giving away the exact players, and I'm always as honest as I can be, right? But I mean, I'm listing a handful of players at each position that I like. But then you're also actually having to do your lineups while you're on the show, which can be incredibly distracting and nerve wracking when news breaks. It actually burned me on a show earlier this year, like where there was like breaking news. I mean, Eric Bledsoe was out, and if you go back and watch the show, I think it's like everyone's face on the show is like, oh god damn it, right? Because like we all got to adjust our lineups like while we're still talking and doing the show. My first like Rotor Grinders article that I wrote is 2015 or 2000, I think it was 2016. I did like a thing where I would look back at the previous week of NFL, use the concepts of like the players that won, and try to pick a lineup on Monday or Tuesday of the following week that you would then enter in a single entry contest. And the first article I wrote, I came up with this lineup. Oh, this guy in a dome did well against this defense, so we could use the quarterback that's playing that team in a dome, next week. And that lineup won the single entry contest. And I was the only one that entered it. And it was, I entered like a $2 single entry contest. I could still enter those at the time. And I entered it on FanDuel, and nobody else duplicated my lineup. And I thought from that time forward, no one
pays really paying attention enough, right?
Nobody's paying attention. Right? And even if they're paying attention, something gets lost in the execution. It's like, yeah, I'm fine giving away like content on a slate. I mean, and things are not exact. Like, I'm obviously never giving away. As soon as I wrote that article, it was like Scott, the editor, the next week is like, hey, just so you know, like, community guidelines suggest you not give away whole lineups, in an article. Can you not do that going forward? I'm sure, So, like, yeah, you never give away an entire lineup. So, yeah, there's enough, like, nebulous area in the execution where yeah, like, I give away, on content. I'll go and, do content and just give away whoever I think are the best plays at the time that I'm doing the content.
Right, and me, I do the same thing by just yelling at people to look at the fucking projections.
Yeah.
Right, But the difference is that like I'm actually utilizing other people's projections. You have your own model where it may be slightly different than what, but you have to admit in NBA, unless you're adding or subtracting some minutes that you don't agree with around the industry, that most NBA models are virtually like so similar.
I will. So I don't want to reveal the secret sauce. I'll say I used to do like my own model as best as I could, and then starting like this season, a little bit towards the end of last year, and then this season, I started I can't. What I do could best be described as like aggregating projections and then tweaking them. I do I'll definitely tweak them, but I realized like I can't build something better than what actually spurred me on to do it was like Chris Jimino invited me into like the projections like Discord chat, and I've seen these guys argue over like how does Monte Morris being out affect like Will Barton's assist rate towards the last 3 minutes of the Nuggets games. And they'll argue over that for 8 hours, ripping on each. How can you possibly think Will Barton's assist rate is not going to go? These guys are putting so much more thought into it than I could possibly put. I think the Roto Grinders projections are excellent. I think you can aggregate projections, and I think that's a viable strategy. I think you can aggregate projections and then tweak them. But I know I no longer do my own NBA model from the ground up.
Didn't you? I remember on Twitter, I believe, that didn't you have an issue like maybe a year or two ago with baseball? Like you had your best year in baseball, and then like you found out that you like your model, you never actually computed like the runs of the players.
Yeah, it was this past baseball season. Yeah, because I think I was posting this just a few months ago. It was immediately after the baseball season. I was doing like something. I think it might have even I was like entering the Game 7 World Series showdown or something, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm like counting triples as runs or something, like something absurd like that. Right? I was like way overweighting triples. I forget what it was, and it was like, yeah, this has been junk the whole year, right? Like obviously it's it's correlated to what the projection would have been, right? Like I'm not like subtracting something where I should have been adding it. I think I might have been mixed up the multiplier for like triples and stolen bases or something like that. So it wasn't even that terrible, right? Like guys who are going to have a lot of triples probably are going to have a lot of stolen bases or whatever. But it was like, yeah, this is like in terms of being like accurate down to like this, 2 decimal places or something. Like no, so, it's just guesstimation at this point. And
you still had a great baseball season.
Yeah, and I still had a great year, right? Because I'm so much of it comes down to like contest selection, like bankroll management, our strategy with lines. Baseball strategy is often pretty straightforward. Of stack teams that you think are going to score runs, be under owned, and don't like stack against your pitcher or whatever, right? So like baseball strategy can be somewhat straightforward. But yeah, like it didn't affect my ROI, but maybe that was just variance too. So who knows?
Right. You don't know, right?
Yeah.
Right, because people look at my baseball strategy a lot of times and go, well, that I always get whenever the Marlins, the Pirates, the Tigers go off for double-digit runs, I almost always get at least one message going. Looks like, do you have anything going? Because that's my macro strategy in baseball. Because like no matter, sometimes on some short slates you have those cheap teams like be chalk, but most of the time no one wants to play these fucking teams. And baseball's too variant that these teams should not be 3% owned on the slate. And it's just like, I'm going to play like what you do with your portfolio strategy. Every day, a third of my portfolio, 20% of my portfolio, because in baseball I will play like 100 lineups or something. I'll have 20 lineups of whatever the shittiest, whatever the cheapest, shittiest team that fits properly, has a cheap catcher batting sixth, and like it fits in where I could like pay up for 2 stud pitchers. Like, I'm just going to play. 20% of my portfolio is going to be that every single day. It's going to hit maybe once or twice a year, but when it hits, that's $25,000 to $50,000, and I don't have to worry about the day anymore. Like it's just like I'm going to have 2 teams that are cheap. It's going to be the Marlins and the Mariners. Tomorrow it could be the Tigers and the Pirates. It's going to be, as long as it's not against the stud pitcher. Typically, I like if they're playing like Cole or like I just don't even bother because the likelihood of them putting up 15 runs is probably way low. They should be that owned, but to me that's a macro strategy. But how do you teach someone that? Like, because it's not slate related. Like, it's literally not slate related. It's like, well, why do you like the Marlins today? Because they're cheap. Like,
Yeah.
people don't accept that answer of like, is there anything specific? No. You're just cheap.
I dislike doing baseball content the most because it's so repetitive and it doesn't necessarily have a huge a huge impact on who I'm actually going to be playing. So like I can tell you who I think what third baseman has the best matchup, right? It's Nolan Arenado facing the left-handed pitcher in Coors or whatever, right? But there's a salary cap. You can only and then which of the $3,000 third baseman do I think has the best chance? I don't know, right? Whichever one you're stacking with the rest of his teammates, to the maximum extent possible, right? I mean, and yeah, the guy that's got the tough matchup, who's facing a righty or whatever in a bad park that hits 2 home runs is going to be the winner, and hopefully he's got some of his teammates on base, so they're getting runs in RBI, and you're winning a tournament, and hopefully it's like Kansas City or something.
Right, but the problem is that well, what? Tell me exactly who that's going to be. It's like,
right.
no. My strategy is over 200 slate. Like my strategy exists in the same way that your lineup portfolio of 150 lineups. It's like this is my strategy. It's represented by 150 lineups. My baseball strategy is represented by 200 slates. Like it's it's just like I'm going to invest in this type of strategy virtually every day, so that you'll always hear me the vomit stacks of the week. I mean the vomit stacks of the day, and that's my strategy. And then I rarely play the expensive. I play the expensive stacks when they're under-owned. Where everyone's going to Coors, and I'm going to play the expensive Dodgers because everyone's playing expensive Rockies. You do that, but that only represents 10% of my I'm doing that every slate. So I need to basically find the assets of that portfolio every single day, and they'll change it depends on today. It's the cheap value penny stock is the Marlins. Tomorrow it could be the Tigers. Tomorrow it could be the Reds. But I'm basically taking that slice of portfolio and just this is what I'm doing for 200 slates, and hopefully I come out profitable at the end of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think of it that way because I don't do single entry baseball, but yeah, that's exactly what I would do. I'm going to take the under-owned stacks, right? The vomit stacks.
So, John, on Twitter, why don't does someone have Squirrel Patrol on Twitter? Is that the reason why you don't use that Twitter name, or is it too long?
So this was just my personal Twitter, and then I became Squirrel Patrol, right?
How did you become what? That's one thing I don't think I've ever heard. What the fuck Squirrel Patrol mean?
It's just it's named after my dogs. So actually, my bankroll for DFS came because I played season-long Yahoo leagues in 2013, 2014, and I made $10 and $20,000 playing these. I'd play dozens of season-long Yahoo leagues, but I would name them after my dogs. So it would be like Squirrel Patrol or Puppy Brigade or Barkley Brigade or whatever, right? And then when I was signing up for FanDuel, I'm going to take one of these crazy Yahoo football team names, and that's going to be my handle. And it ended up being Squirrel Patrol, right? Because we'd have these 2 100-pound dogs, and they would take them on walks, and they'd start tearing off after a squirrel. It'd be all right, easy there, Squirrel Patrol, right? So we need to finish the walk and just get home. And I could have just as easily been known as Puppy Brigade this whole time, right? Thankfully, I picked Squirrel Patrol, which is not as crazy as some of the other derisive kind of nicknames we made for our dogs.
What other names were there other than I need to know some ulterior names.
Yeah, I can't really remember. Unfortunately, one of the dogs has passed away. So a lot of them were named around Barkley, right? Barkley's Brigade or whatever, Barkley's Army. And I happened to pick Squirrel Patrol. This is 6 or this is 8, 9 years ago now. Yeah.
But do people? I mean, because that's the Squirrel Patrol, or is it weird to you when people even in when you go to live finals that out of any they know you? Hey, Squirrel. Hey, it's calling you Squirrel in the same way that people call me Blender, and it's this is the only forum. This is the only community where people call each other by parts of their username, Like it's CSU. It's like, no, it's Peter Jennings. Like when his name's Peter. Like it's like
Think about Chipotle Act. I think about that probably every month, right? Like he's just sitting there in his 20s, like I'm eating Chipotle. And now he's probably like in his mid 30s. I don't know him, right? But he might be married with a kid. Who knows, right? And he's like, I don't like Chipotle that much, right? Like but everybody knows him as Chipotle addict. I actually kind of prefer when people call me Squirrel Patrol at events. I think it creates like identity separation, right? Because like John is the guy that's way more careful with his money and would never gamble, right? Like the Squirrel Patrol can do whatever he wants.
right. To your wife, you're John Breslin, but to the DFS community, you're Squirrel Patrol.
Right, yeah, like John Breslin would never lose money on DFS. But
right, John Breslin would never tilt enter the late slate or enter this qualifier or do these things, but Squirrel Patrol, like when Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't pay attention. Like so many people have called me Squirrel Patrol at this point that I hear it just like the name John, right? I wouldn't even know if somebody was calling me, if you asked me a few seconds later, was he calling you John or calling you Squirrel Patrol? But yeah.
It also shows that maybe you don't, like me, you don't relate to that many people outside of the DFS community.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. That's also, it's like I'm so used to people, blender. It's like, especially when they don't get that H&D means blender head, and then people think it's whatever. It just, I'm more of a branding type of thing. So like, if I can't get blender head as a Twitter name, like my username is going to be blender HD, like everywhere, just so I don't have to explain it. It's different in different places. Like it's one of those types of things. So like I could have had Blenderhead on DK, but it's like, well, how do I follow you on Twitter? Well, you have to go to Blender, but it's with the H. Like fuck it, just like it's the same everywhere. Fuck it, who cares?
Yeah, I wonder if like the person that has a Squirrel Patrol handle gets a lot of like DFS questions.
No, I don't think you could make a screen name on Twitter that long. I think there's 15 characters.
Oh, really?
So let Squirrel Patrol. I'm gonna look right now.
Okay.
I'm surprised you haven't looked. Squirrel Patrol.
I probably looked a couple of years ago.
Oh no, there is Haley T. 6 followers, joined April 2009, and has not tweeted. So it's very similar to my Blenderhead, the person that has Blenderhead that hasn't tweeted in God knows how long. Also, they just took it. Squirrel Patrol.
I wonder if I could get the handle right. Like,
which do you think is more valuable to you, the Squirrel Patrol Twitter handle, or NBA Top Shots?
Yeah. At least like if I pay money, I don't.
Would you pay money at Squirrel Patrol? Would you try to find Haley T?
Because like I'm not that into the content, right? I often wonder, like, I should try to be more anonymous than I
right.
I
You think
right?
you'd rather have bang your head against the keyboard and that's your Twitter handle, rather than
So I don't know like what I would do with Squirrel. If somebody's trying to tweet angrily at Squirrel Patrol, let whoever Haley is, let her deal with that.
Right. They haven't responded. Let's see. I'm gonna look on Twitter and see if there's anyone that has tweeted at Squirrel Patrol. Let's see recently, because maybe someone has.
I've seen a couple of times. Like people have put like a bunch of like a username and somebody will say like at Squirrel Patrol, and I'll think like that's not me.
Right, nothing recently.
All right.
No, so I guess you'd rather it that way, right?
Yeah.
But if people want to follow you, Jay Breslin, because you couldn't get Jay Breslin, that's why it's Jay Breslin.
I think so. I think I just wanted it to be shorter. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things. I just happen to be in the lineup, right? There's no absolute reason for it at all.
Yeah.
And then if people subscribe to Roto Grinders, they could hear your stuff on Crunch Time and Q Hunting, and obviously, as usual, just like your Twitter profile, you know where they could find you.
On the leaderboards, yeah.
Right right above you in the leaderboards on DraftKings and FanDuel. So thanks for coming on for just showing like kind of the inside of like how a quote professional player thinks that it's not magic. Like it's like I think what we've said throughout the show is quite sensible and normal. You're not some bot or something, right? You're not some fake, some system. I have the supercomputer. It's like we're just normal people.
Yeah, it's a huge compliment. Cause when I first started playing DFS, I always assumed it was like some kind of Russian hedge fund supercomputer thing. Like all these usernames I didn't recognize, but they're consistently at the top. So it's incredible compliment that somebody could be thinking that about me. But yeah, just a just regular guy.
Right, we're real people. We're real people. Yeah. And if you want to become like one of our as a real person, go buy the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.
All right.